Hello and welcome to Catalyst Conversations. Today, I'm a little bit excited to have Dan Rosen with us. Dan, CEO of ARIA. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, mate. Good to be here.
Yeah, very excited to see what lessons we can learn from you today. ARIA, what does it mean? What does it stand for? Why does it exist?
Yeah, ARIA is an acronym for the Australian Recording Industry Association, and it's there to represent the interests of Australian record labels and recording artists, and really there to try to help music industry, recording industry specifically, grow. And for the first part of my time, was a lot playing defence and trying to protect against encroachings of piracy and eradication of copyright. And thankfully, we've returned to growth over the last 4 or 5 years, and it's how do we increase the pie both here in Australia and the opportunities for artists, not just in Australia, but now in a global market.
What role do you believe music plays in driving societal change? I mean, when we look at what's going on in the world right now, in particular, Black Lives Matter, what role do you believe music plays there?
I think music plays a very supportive role in that, and artists are often at the vanguard of this. If we go back to the 60s, whether it was Bob Dylan and others in that movement kind of driving that social change, I think now there are artists, and particularly the black artists in America, where hip hop is such a dominant form of music, are really taking this next challenge. And so music, because artists are fundamentally telling their truths and great storytellers and have a great emotional connection with their fans, I think when they do speak out on issues, it does have resonance. And I think artists, when they're at their best, are the ones who reflect back to our society, the good parts, sometimes the not so good parts, but they're definitely always part of what will be the next form of societal change. And we see it here in Australia as well. I think the best artists are the ones that can use their platforms to speak their truth. And if their truth is to talk out on social issues, then great. Some artists don't feel comfortable in that, but a lot of artists do.
And you talk about change and the power of change through music. A lot of our clients in across corporate Australia are equally going on a journey of change, which requires them to look at their culture. What role or what value can music bring to workplace culture?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of research into that, and certainly playing music helps inspire the mood of a workplace culture. We certainly know, particularly, we spend more time in retail environments where we know that not does it just help your staff, but it helps your customers in retail and restaurants and cafes. And if your customers are happier, then your staff's happier. If your staff's happier, then your customers are happier. And then usually your owners are happier because they're making more money. So we typically find when looking at it that scientifically, music improves mood. So if you can attach the right music to the mood that you want to create in your workplace, in your store, in your restaurant, in your cafe, then that certainly has a huge impact on the bottom line. And ultimately, that's a positive thing for business.
Music, clearly a passionate topic, and a lot of people, I imagine, who work for you in ARIA are passionate people. How do you balance that passion with business performance in terms of, this is a business full of passionate people. How do you get your culture right?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's an interesting question. And we at ARIA probably more at the coalface of dealing at the business side, at the government side, at stakeholder management side. So often when we're hiring people, it's saying, yes, you are in the music business, but you're in show business dichotomy, you're working on the business side less than the show side. There are some nice show parts of it, but really understanding that you're there to serve the labels and the artist, and that your role is to be a facilitator of that. And yes, you'll get to go to some great events and you get to talk about interesting people and work on interesting issues, but never lose sight of the fact of what your role is. So it's finding that balance, I think, between understanding that you're working in something you're passionate about, but ultimately you're still there to deliver a job. And And so, yes, the focus is delivering your job, but every now and then you need to make sure that you're getting people out to shows, inviting artists in to come and perform or to talk about what they do, because you're not delivering a widget. You are dealing with creativity and with emotion and with artists who are emotional, creative, innovative people. So you don't want to lose sight of the fact that what you're doing does have relevance and does have importance. So it's finding that balance between keeping people focused on the task at hand, but still reminding them that what they're doing has value and has importance.
Absolutely. And from a performance perspective, what percentage of decision making in the business do you believe is gut based versus evidence and data based?
Well, I think like most people, most things are becoming evidence and database, and we don't deal in A&R, which our label members do, which is A&R is about deciding what acts to sign and not to sign. I think 20 years ago that was very much gut based, whereas today, because of the more data that's available through these digital platforms, Spotify and YouTube and Instagram, you definitely have more evidence to be able to make those decisions. There's still always an art to it, and it will never be pure science. Creativity is not pure science. There is always the art element to it, but there's definitely more data coming into decisions than ever before. And I think that's helpful because you want to get as much evidence as you can, but you still need the human being at the end of the day to be able to say, all right, given all the evidence, with my scarce resources, where do I want to invest my time, energy, and money?
And from a technology perspective, you mentioned Spotify. There's new stuff coming up all the time. TikTok's obviously incredibly successful. How do these technology platforms impact your business?
Well, the technology platforms and music have a very symbiotic relationship. I talk about, I think, the 19 of the top 20 most viewed videos of all time on YouTube are music videos. 7 of the top 10 most followed people on Twitter and Facebook are musicians. So music really helps drive these platforms and are a huge part of their popularity and getting them started. I think for YouTube, it still remains a massive part of the platform. Anywhere from 30 to 45% of views on YouTube have been music videos. TikTok is really built off the fact of people using snippets of music to create little video vignettes of themselves. So again, another major platform is launched off the back of music. The positive from a music industry perspective is, as the 10 years ago, 15 years ago, YouTube, Facebook and others launched without being licensed to actually play music. And it took the industry time to get the licenses in place, and now they are in place, and these have become really good partners. And I think TikTok, it was much quicker time between launch and when they were licensed. So that money is now starting to flow back into the system. We'd always want it to be more. We need to continue to negotiate those. But understanding that music helps build these platforms, and these platforms recognizing that they have to reward the content that helps build their audience. So we're in a much better place with the technology platforms than we were a decade ago. But they're changing all the time. 10 years ago, it was all about the iTunes download. And at the moment, it's all about the streaming services. Then TikTok comes along and changing the game again. I know that if we spoke in 5 years, believe me, there'll be a huge platform that none of us have even thought about. But the one thing that has remained consistent is the music. And I think that's content. Great content can exist on platforms. So if we think about a Beatles record, that is sold on vinyl, then it's sold on cassette, then it's sold on CD, then it's sold on download, and now it's on streaming. And the music is eternal, regardless of the platform. So we need to continue as an industry to invest in great artists, to support great artists, create great art, great music, great content, and that will be able to live on whatever the platform is. Then it's incumbent on ARIA to make sure that the ecosystem and the environment rewards those creators, so the money flows back to the creators and the labels and the publishers that invest in them.
Wow. I mean, it's a huge continuous journey. It sounds like change is the only constant in the industry. And with that would come so many learnings for yourself. tell me, 9 years in,
Mm.
what's the best mistake you've made?
In this particular job, I think, probably, I'm not sure the best mistake. I mean, I made a lot early. I think early on, it was my first CEO job. I think you'd probably try and take on a little bit too much. And I think learning to delegate and trust your team and training your team rather than doing the work yourself. I think that was the big transition for me, going into being a leader of an organisation. And I got some advice probably a couple of years in, which was, your job as a CEO is to consistently manage yourself out of a job. Try to come up with ideas, train your team or build a team around it, and then be able to get above it so that you can start thinking about the next thing. And I think that was really useful, that you want to try to, you may not be able to get to a blank sheet of paper, but your goal is to be able to get back to a blank sheet of paper to start charting out what the next 6, 12, 18 months look like. And that just clicked something in my mind. It's not about being busy all the time. It's about being smart and learning how to best direct your resources and your energy and your thinking. And that unlocked a few things for me. So probably my mistake early was getting too far into the weeds and not building my team and the resilience and the expertise of the team.
If we now look forwards, do you have a vision for ARIA?
Well, we had a very different vision for 2020 to what it's become, but certainly for us, it's how do we compete in the global world, and how can ARIA be the beacon of Australian music to a global audience? We have been traditionally bound by a population of 25 million people and physical borders. We now exist in a world where there are 4 or 5 dominant music platforms who combined have an audience of over 2 billion people. Mm. So today our artists, Australian music is no longer bound by the local record store, even though that's a hugely important part of the business. But 85, 90% of the business is now based on these global platforms with global audiences. So the opportunity is that we have a global audience. You now have access to 2-3 billion people. The challenge is that you are now competing against the entire history of recorded music every day to every music fan, not just in Australia, but around the world. So it's about harnessing the opportunities and minimising those threats. And to me, that's the challenge for Australian creativity and Australian content. The opportunity is you have global audiences. The threat is you have global competitors, and the traditional ways of protecting a local market no longer exists. And so it's about being born global, thinking global, while still maintaining a strong local culture and local presence. That's the challenge, and that's the opportunity, I think, of the next 10 years for content and creativity in Australia.
Yep. I think borders are starting to dilute for everyone in a sort of non-literal sense, and so this, dominating locally but starting to think globally is certainly an opportunity. There's a question that I have to ask every CEO because it's a wonderful learning. If you could travel back 9 years and visit yourself on day one of this job as CEO, what advice would you give yourself, Dan?
I probably could have dressed a bit less formally than I did when I first started. I'm getting more casual the longer I stay in the role, which I know is a good or a bad thing. I think we discussed it earlier. I think for me, the lesson was learning how to be a leader is that it's not about you necessarily being, busyness doesn't equate to being good in your job. And I think when you often previously it's about how much work you do, whereas getting to be a leader is about understanding what is the best role you can play for your organisation at that time. So I think if I could go back to myself, it would be to try to, you've got to be, someone meant, the porpoise or the dolphin. Yes, you have to be able to be in the weeds, but you have to be able to come up and give yourself a bird's eye view to start charting. You're the person that has to chart the course for the 6 months, 12 months, 2 years that's what your organisation, your board is looking for you to do. And if you're too stuck in the weeds, you can't do that. And I think that took me maybe a year or two to understand. So if I could have brought that forward a little bit, that would have been the lesson I would like to have given myself. But to be honest, it's probably a good lesson that I had to come to that journey, because if someone would have told me that straight up, you wouldn't have believed it. So I probably had to go through it myself.
Yeah, no, it's a great perspective, and it's probably very true that some of these things just have to be learnt and can't necessarily be taught directly. Listen, we wish you and the team at ARIA all the success for the next chapter. I would ask you to grab that what looks like a fairly old guitar off the wall and play us a tune, but don't worry, I won't.
No worries.
But thanks again for sharing all your insights, and much appreciated, Dan. All the best.
No worries, mate. Thanks for having me, and I hope you found it some useful, and good to be part of it.
Cheers.